Benjamin's trope was high heresy, given the orthodoxy of mid-20th century modernity. He rejected the ideology of progress that virtually, and its virtually theological conviction that Western society was building paradise on earth through technology and social management and corporate rule. Where we thought we saw progress, Benjamin's angel of history sees only disaster. Disaster, of course, that is justified by our historic mission, whether that be manifest destiny, or the war to end all wars, or the mission to bring democracy and free markets to the globe. Benjamin, against the optimism of progressive ideology, was right. The severe imperative to conform to the canons of economic growth or technological development or political consolidation has in fact made this ideology a storm that has driven us into a disastrous future. But our backs are turned because we are living in denial. A single contemporary fact vindicates Benjamin's vision as prophetic in the apocalyptic tradition. Namely, about 30 years ago, we crossed a historic line into an era of permanent ecological crisis. The 2004 Living Planet report shows that our annual drawdown of natural capital is liquidating Mother Nature. The analysis of the global ecological footprint indicates that human activities have been in an overshoot position for 3 decades and are rapidly increasing over time. In other words, we have in fact entered the era of endgame. Each year we use 140% of the bioproductive capacity of the earth, but we live in denial. And that's why our text today portray Jesus struggling to wake us up to the grim reality. Are you asleep? Were you not strong enough to stay awake? He asked his disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane. Of all the many queries posed by Jesus, the great interlocutor, to his disciples, this is by far the most unsettling one. And it has distinct apocalyptic overtones. Now, Peter, as we heard in our gospel reading this morning, just moments earlier has vowed that he would never abandon Jesus, just as they emerged from their Passover Seder, to which Jesus responded darkly that you, Peter, above all, will take refuge in denial. Peter is the patron saint of all us heroic activists who pledge to save the world. Our spirit is willing, but our flesh is manifestly weak. And when Jesus invites us to keep vigil with him and the angel of history through the dark night, we're either too busy or asleep, like Peter. The consequences of Peter's inability to stay awake, Mark reveals in the poignant vignette of Peter's denial. Mark narrates the scene as a sort of split screen with archetypal power. Inside the courtroom, Jesus stands trial before the Sanhedrin, accused of heresy and treason. Outside, Peter stands in the courtyard, unable to follow Jesus into the dock, but also unwilling to abandon him altogether. It's the best he can do, given his inner conflict and fears. Mark tells us that Peter was standing with the imperial guards, warming himself at their fire. How revealing. If we can't follow Jesus sooner or later, we stand confused and fearful, warming ourselves at the imperial fire. We who enjoy race, class, and or gender privileges in the first world, I think we know a thing or two about this moment. And then comes the moment of truth, when we are challenged to reveal our true loyalties. Citizen or disciple? We stammer and stutter in 1,000 different ways, knowing that we have a get-out-of-jail-free card if we just toe the line. Squeezed by conflicting loyalties and the imperial vice, Peter makes a fateful choice. He seeks refuge in the shadow world of denial. And there it is. To forfeit the truth about ourselves and the world in order to save our sorry asses. That's the deal that empire teaches us to cut, is it not? Is this thing on? It's a Faustian bargain. It's the one Jesus warned us against when he called us to take up our crosses. Jesus understood perfectly the unforgiving psychological and political character of denial. If we flee from the consequences of faithful discipleship, it is into the arms of imperial ignominy. We can't quite follow Jesus, but we can't quite pass as innocent bystanders either. And so Peter began to curse his life. And who wouldn't curse their life in such a moment? Or curse religion, or politics, or history, or one's parents, or friends, or one's own choices. Everything that conspires to bring us to such moments. Finally, cornered and cowering, Peter swears his oath of dissociation. Don't know the man. The inevitable fruit of denial. And at that moment, almost dawn, a rooster's hoarse croon drifts hauntingly in the sudden stillness, and slowly, like a stake being driven into his heart, Peter's soul begins to implode, and he breaks down in bitter weeping. This inconsolable sobbing echoes through the ages, resonating whenever believers have betrayed the vision they held dearest. Throughout the 2 millennia of the Christian era, it has continued to well up as the church struggles with its own apostasy, our trail of tears. And today, in the twilight of a different imperial courtyard, this lament again lodges in our Christian hearts. We too have tried to follow Jesus, but at a distance. We too are being confronted by our conflicted loyalties. We too are realizing our denial. Paralyzed and ashamed before our wailing wall. In this moment, we are invited again to practice apocalyptic faith in order to recover the journey of discipleship. This vocation is revealed in the Garden of Gethsemane. Our vocation is to resist the imperial coma, to stay awake to the horror and the hope, and to remember that closing petition of the Lord's Prayer, keep us from the time of testing. If we don't stay awake, we'll inevitably cut deals with the empire. But this is such a difficult vigil to keep, and the desire of our spirit so rarely matches the frailty of our flesh. Indeed, Mark's portrait of Gethsemane makes clear that Jesus himself is no aloof demigod, serenely reflecting on the mystery of human pathos. Quite the contrary, he's sweating blood, profoundly distressed that it's all come to this. He prayed that the hour might pass. Jesus hopes desperately that there might be some other way to change the world. Can't we do this through legislation? But he remains awake while the disciples fall asleep, no doubt dreaming of lifestyles of the rich and famous. So when the authorities come to arrest Jesus, all the disciples can think to do is to fight or to flee, both of which merely strengthen the imperial hand. Only Jesus embraces the Via Crucis.